NewFilmmakers Los Angeles in partnership with Movie Maker magazine. I'm Carolyn McDonald, and I'm here with Aaron Jose and his film, One Pint at a Time. Let's take a look at a clip from the film.
This journey is not just about beer. The beer is just one side of it. There are a lot of other elements of the company that we look to facilitate. One is controlling the narrative that Black people don't drink beer. Black people have always had a hand in producing beer, but ultimately that's been robbed of the narrative, and we look to be not the only company that's in operation that's bringing that back, but just one company that's happened to be doing it a different way, particularly in the South.
So Aaron, how are you today?
Doing all right, a little under the weather, but I'm happy to be here talking to y'all.
Great. I'm glad to have you here today. So for people who haven't seen the film, tell us what it's about. Give us a little synopsis of it.
So basically, One Pint at a Time is the first feature-length documentary ever produced that focuses exclusively on the Black experience in craft beer. And what I mean by that is, looking at it from the little bit on the patron side, but more importantly on the brewer side and the beer brand owner and influencer side. And it's a project that my wife and I produced because when we became avid beer drinkers, we realized that tap rooms were very homogenous in patrons and in the staff and the management and the brewing staff in the back. So being the curious documentary person that I am, I did some research on the industry, and this is around 2017, because this is a 4-year project, and discovered some pretty alarming statistics. For example, that the industry generates tens of billions, or in some years hundreds of billions of dollars in revenue from sales and all the ancillary merchandise and whatnot. And we're going on to 9,000 breweries. We're in the 8,000 range, but we're going to be around 9,000 pretty soon. And less than 1% of those breweries are Black owned and operated. And 33% of the consumer base identifies themselves as multicultural. So I find that to be kind of a disconcerting discrepancy between the two. And drinking, spending your money on something that you don't really have ownership, or the people that look like you don't have ownership on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Right. Wow. Yeah, it's very, very interesting. Very, very interesting. So tell us, you said it's been a 4-year process of research, and during that time, how many Black brewers did you meet in the industry?
Well, actually, over the years, I've met quite a few, and I couldn't get all of them into a 90-minute film, but we ended up with 3. And, we followed the first Black female brewer in the state of Connecticut, the first Black-owned brewery in the South that's based in New Orleans, and then the newest Black-owned brewery in the Tampa Bay area. So these are folks that I kind of met through my networking. Mm-hmm. And we also have a segment on the first ever Black Beer Festival in US history, which was Fresh Fest, Beer Fest, which has since been rebranded into 2 separate events, Barrel and Flow and Blacktoberfest. Mm-hmm. But it started out as Fresh Fest. Mm-hmm. So we cover a lot of those things in the industry that no other film has really done, as a whole. There have been films that have interviewed Black brewers, but they haven't really told their stories the way that this film does. So we're very happy.
Right, as well you should be. I mean, and out of those stories, I mean, can you talk about a little bit about what their challenges have been, in the industry, like you said, because of the discrepancy, and them, establishing their business and maintaining their business?
Yeah, so a lot of the similarities across, I would say, minority brewers, not just Black brewers, but you find that there's a challenge for capital, to accrue capital to start your brewery. And then a lot of folks have a challenge in finding a space, so a home for their brewing facility. So you find that a lot more minority owned brands now are doing what is called contract brewing. So they set up a contract to brew at another established facility so that they can get their brand out. And then some of them even have distributors that can get their beer out to different parts of the country. And for some of the brewers in my film, that's kind of what they prefer to do. They don't want a brewing facility, but other brewers in my film are pursuing that, brewing facility. And it's tough because, they submitted several letters of intent for locations, and it just keeps falling through. And that's an ongoing struggle. And in the case of one brewer, he's continuously tied up in lawsuits with his brand and legal battles and whatnot. It's just crazy. But those are the two primary things. It's access to capital. I mean, aside from the fact that, we have a huge wealth gap in the country, and there's also this thing called generational wealth, where if a white dude with a beard wants to start his brewery, maybe someone in the family can give him a loan, or if he goes to a bank, he'll get it a lot easier than a minority person will. That's just the nature of how the country works, So it's access to capital and finding a home for the brewery. Right. So a lot of times minority brewers end up just dedicating their time to getting their brand out, to build like brand evangelists. And some of them are happy just doing that. Others do want to get that brewing facility, but they're not quite there yet.
Right. And as far as that facility and that location, is that a restriction for all brewers? I mean, in terms of requirements from, I don't know what the organization would be, that like a health department or something that would determine what is the best place for, the brewing to be done. Is there a way that that's ever going to change? You see that ever changing so that it would make it better for, easier, not easier, but it's just more accessible for our brewers of color to
that's a pretty complicated question, because I would imagine the smartest move for minority brewers that want to erect their own brewing facilities is to bring it to their own communities where they can hire from within, because this has been for years something that white-owned breweries have not necessarily done a great job with. So you hear a lot of times, craft breweries and coffee shops, right, and antique stores are part of like those initial businesses that are considered when areas are being gentrified. You drop a brewery in an area, right? Someone who has capital comes to an area where the real estate is low. They drop in their brewery, they bring in their pals to work, and then the clientele comes from outside, and then just everything goes up, all the value goes up. Instead of going into a community, understanding the community, and trying to hire from within the community, to bring jobs to the community. There are breweries that do that, I'm sure. But I think I'm pretty certain, I can say this with certainty because I've spoken to a lot of minority brewers about this, is that if they're going to build a brewery, they're going to build it in a neighborhood that's theirs.
Absolutely.
Where they can introduce beer to their people and have their people working in the community so they can help, grow with the community.
Absolutely.
It's not just they're gonna, whatever the best health situation is or whatever, that's gonna be I would guess a state by state thing, maybe a county by county, city by city. It varies. But more importantly, it's being strategic in where you're going to build your brewery, because you want to give back to a specific community that needs that, that influx of money.
Right, absolutely. And it's building business, like you said, in the minority community. But I want you to elaborate too on the history, you're talking about our people and of beer. Can you talk about the history of beer, just a little general? Because what was so fascinating to me in your film, I never knew that beer started in Egypt and with women. So can you tell us a little bit about that history? And I love the fact that the brewery was it called, Bastet, honored that history. Can you tell the audience about that?
Yeah, so if you go to beer events, you might see someone wearing a shirt or a hat that says beer history is Black history. And it's kind of like this re-embracing of traditional roots that started in ancient Egypt and continue in African countries even today. Because even today in African countries, there are a lot of different brewing styles and traditions that are continue to be upheld, and it's predominantly women that do the brewing in the homes, in the villages. In terms of going way back, we talk a little bit about ancient, Egyptian history of brewing and how they, built the pyramids, and they paid for the building of the pyramids with beer, and they had different beer goddesses and whatnot. So that's how far these traditions go. I mean, even Sumerian, which I believe is before, yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's before. So it goes even further back. But these are things that folks don't really talk about because they kind of don't have, they haven't had to really, because everyone seems to think about beer as a Eurocentric thing. Comes from Germany, comes from Belgium, maybe the Netherlands. And they, think about the monks and, the Trappist beers. That's what most people think about because they think about, Oktoberfest.
Yeah.
That's kind of where they go with that. Yeah, and Guinness, that's kind of where they go with that, but that's it. That's why I felt the responsibility, since I was focusing on Black brewers, to kind of go a little further back to say, hey, these traditions existed way before the Europeans came to the African continent and brought their traditions into the African continent. And yes, one of the brewers in the film is very much into preserving some of those, styles and naming his beers after, different Egyptian gods and whatnot. So as a matter of fact, I want to give a shout out to Bastet. Yesterday, they celebrated their first year anniversary.
Oh, fabulous.
And they had a great party, and we were there, and we were very happy for them. So
fabulous. Yeah, I'm very happy for them too. Fabulous. So talk about the logistics of production, actually shooting, because you talked about the research time and talked to someone in Connecticut and then New Orleans and Florida. Can you tell us about how you connected those dots, in the story and were able to, shoot these different events in those locations?
Yeah, so our research, I mean, logically, because it's the easier thing to do, I kind of started my research more locally with the beer scene here in Orlando, the Orlando area, and out in the Tampa Bay area, which is a much bigger and more of a world-class beer scene compared to Orlando, and a well-respected beer scene in the country and internationally, and just the numbers were just not there. I mean, some female brewers and maybe a Hispanic head, assistant brewer here and there, but just the numbers weren't there. This is in 2017. So, we came across this article by accident in my Facebook feed about Fresh Fest, that it was happening. And I had very little time to put a crew together to go to Pittsburgh to cover it, but we did. And that's where we met two of the brewers in the film and connected, connected also with other brewers that aren't in the project, but you build relationships with everyone while you're there, and they see what you're doing, and they get behind you and they cheer you on. So that's kind of how that worked. And just after meeting the first two brewers there, then meeting the one in Florida and having Fresh Fest, you just kind of need to start structuring your film and determining how much you need to shoot.
Right.
And more importantly, you need to have stories that you can carry across a 3-act structure, 90 minutes. So like a beginning, a middle, and end, so that you feel like they've gone on some kind of journey and have grown or kind of transformed in some way by the end of the film.
Absolutely.
That's kind of what we wanted to do is we wanted to have brewers in the film that were at different stages of their their brands. Some that were kind of just starting and going for that brewing facility, some that have been around for a little while, had been struggling, but still going for that same goal. And maybe others that just wanted to get their beer out and hustle. And it wasn't so much about getting a brewing facility as it is about getting the beer to as many different liquor stores as possible across the country. So that was fun. I mean, it was a lot of work, small crews for the most part, and just catch can for 2.5, 3 years.
Yeah.
And then about a year's worth of post-production, and then just, plugging in shots wherever you can get them. We made friends along the way with production teams in different cities that we went to. Some of them happened to be production companies that also did beer stories.
Oh, wow.
So when I needed their help, they were very willing to jump in and say, yes, we'll help you out.
Oh, great.
So we grew our production family over time. And
oh, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. Now, did you edit the film yourself, or was there another edit? You did edit yourself. So how did
the film myself with a lot of, just feedback from my wife and producer, and then from, some trusted colleagues in my inner circle, so to speak, that knew about the project, but they were disconnected from it enough to give me the feedback was needed, so they could be objective.
Nice. So tell me, where would you like to see this film have the most influence, or how, I should say, would you like to see your film have the most influence in the community?
Well, there's a couple of things that we want to do with the film. Obviously, if we can land on a streaming platform in the next year or so, that would bode very well, because then you reach a more international audience. And we feel that the film is relatable, not just to those people that love beer, but to small business owners or just folks with dreams. We all have dreams. Look at these people fighting for their dreams. I want people to come away from this saying, oh, damn, I'm not going to complain about what I'm going through. Look at what they're going through. I'm going to keep fighting for my dreams. Or I'm a minority business owner. Look at what they're going through as minority business owners. I'm going to keep pushing forward. There's that. There's also, if you're a white-owned brewery, maybe use the film as a mirror to look at your own philosophy or business practices or blind spots that you've had over the years. We would like to, I would say late next year into 2023 is a realistic time frame for this, to re-edit a version of the film for classroom friendly runtime and make it available for brewing arts curricula across the country. We have some interest from some minority brewers in Tennessee already that they want to use this at one of their universities, and also as mandatory training for anyone that they hire. And they haven't opened yet. They're about to open next year. And I also have interest from a beer organization in Chicago that wants to use, that was thinking about using this for educational purposes. So that's really how we're going to make a bit more of a grassroots effect, I feel, is to allow the film to keep these streams of conversations open, right?
Yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, and that's the great role of documentary, to be able to do that, to facilitate change and to enlighten and again, support, as you're saying, to give people hope. Ultimately, I'd like to think that's the role of our role as documentarians, is to really ultimately give people hope and sustain that.
Absolutely.
One last question for you.
Sure.
Yourself as a filmmaker, where can we find you, keep up with what you're doing, and tell us about any other projects you have coming down the pipeline?
Well, right now we're working on a couple of spin-off docu-series from this project. Can't give away too many details because we're in the almost pitching period. So we'll have to see what happens there. But there are a couple of things that popped up that, you know, where I said we need to be able to tell more of these stories, because, you know, there's a lot of Asian American brewers, Hispanic brewers, Native American brewers, LGBTQ brewers whose stories are as impactful as the ones in this film. And I'd like to give as many of these folks a platform. So just to kind of broaden the scope of craft beer and let everyone, you know, as many people as possible tell their stories. So we're working on that. There's another documentary that I'm developing that has roots within the LGBTQ community. So we're going to be working on that next year. I have another film right now that's on the festival circuit called A Break for Impact. And it's about a legal studies professor and her 4 pre-law students. They travel to the Texas from Florida and embed themselves within organizations fighting the humanitarian crisis at the Texas-Mexico border. And they discover all of these like harrowing things about what asylum seekers are going through as they're trying to enter and seek asylum and whatnot. So we got to spend time with them in Mexico's largest refugee camp. So that's an interesting project. But for this, you can find us at One Pint Film, so ONEPINTFILM, and that's Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. And we're also available at onepintfilm.com. And we have a screenings page on there. And we also have a reshape page on there. So if you've seen the film and you want to maybe contribute to any scholarships that are advancing people of color in craft beer, we have a list of organizations that are doing that work, you know, because we're not in the beer industry. So we want our film to be more of a vessel, you know, to help them, you know, amplify their voices. So we have a list there. So onepintfilm.com/reshape. And that's really it. You know, follow us, and, you know, we're going to be at, I don't know, another 15 or so festivals between now and February. And who knows what's going to come after that. So we're very excited to have been part of New Filmmakers LA, and they've been great.
Thank you so much. That was a great answer. And I look forward to hearing more. I definitely will be following you. I'm sure everyone here will be following you and all the businesses and finding ways to support everyone. Thank you so much. It's been a joy and an inspiration to talk to you. It really has. Thank you.
Thank you.